Welcome back to another episode of the Zealous Podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder. This week, I've got Brandon Joyner, the Dallas Mavericks assistant strength coach, in the house with me. We're going to talk all about strength, conditioning, and what it's like to be part of the Mavericks organization. I hope you enjoy it. Follow us on Instagram at Rocky_Snyder. Click the subscribe button. You know how it goes. Tell some friends and enjoy the show. So, Brandon, just before I hit the record button, we were talking about the Dallas Mavericks organization and see what you feel about it, coming from Sacramento Kings and now with the Dallas Mavs. Like, you said you felt at home on day one. What's that all about?
I think that across the organization, not just in my department, but they've done a really good job of focusing on hiring people who fit well. So I came in the door and I knew probably only one person here from previous experience, but it was just like open arms day one. We worked together really well. We didn't even have our first official staff meeting for weeks after I first got here, but things were already flowing smoothly. So I just think it's a great group of people. It's the right balance of enjoying your job, having fun, but also showing up and working hard and trying to win. And I think it's just everybody kind of comes in with an understanding of, when it's time to work, we're all in. And then when it's time to play, we're also all in. So just a great environment to be in.
Well, you said something that struck a chord with me, is that they don't necessarily hire talent, they hire the right fit. So obviously everyone they hire is talented or skillful and knowledgeable in the way they need it, but that's not really what you're getting at. What makes you, just if you can be modest enough, but what makes you the good fit?
I don't know. I think a lot of it's on a personality level. I think that there's many different kinds of coaches that are all able to be successful in their own way. But I think it is really nice to have a staff that kind of complements each other in the way that they interact with the athlete, the way that they interact with each other and coaches. I also think we have a very complementary staff in terms of training styles. One of the things about the NBA that I think is a lot different than working in college a lot of times is that you have, a group of 15 to 17 guys, and they range in age from 18 to 40 years old potentially, and they've all trained a different amount. They've all trained with different people. They all fly out in the summer and go train with a different guy. And so I think it is nice that we have a staff full of, different training styles. There's not one unified thing that we think is right. We have a couple touch points that we try to keep in unity, but other than that, you're encouraged to be yourself and train guys the way you train guys. And then, different players are going to gravitate to different coaches because they like to train that way. So just gives you very natural relationships with the athletes. You're never, forced to sell a message that you don't really believe in, because you're not selling a message. You're just telling them what you think. And that's really just the way that everything operates. Everybody here, they want you just to be you. And so I think that for me, it was a good fit coming in, just because, I have my way of training and relating to the guys. I have my certain energy that I bring, and, and other people on the staff have different, but at the same time, we all kind of come together and accept each other as we are, and we like each other to just be us. And so I think it allows you to be in your own skin. So.
Oh, that's great. I'd love to talk about more about that, because I had Nick Winkleman on, and he's the author of the language of coaching. And we talked about coaching in certain ways, but not about style, like coaching style or training approach. I would love to know, like, hey, how would you describe your training style, your coaching philosophy? What is it? If you could, I don't know if you want to just throw out adjectives or really get deeper into it, like where does it come from? So your training style and the origin of your training style, how has it formed to be what it is today?
I think in terms of, not the X's and O's, just the way that I interact with athletes, and even the way I interact with my fellow staff members is I don't like to formalize too much. think for me, everything is conversational. It's a flowing conversation back and forth with my athletes. I don't feel like I need to dictate what we're doing. I'm more of a guide. And so for me, it's a lot of talking back and forth with my guys, trying to get feedback of how things feel. What exercises have worked for you in the past? What exercises do you feel like have worked poorly in the past? What things do you like to do? What do you hate to do? And then flexing around that and being able to kind of meet people in the middle, but also then from the middle, try to guide them in the direction that I think is best. So that's kind of how I relate to athletes in general. I've been a hoop head since who knows how long. So for me, like I very much sometimes come off almost as one of the players. I talk a lot of crap, probably more than I should. And there's certain guys that they're into that and they like that, and there's also certain guys that they don't love that, and that's fine. Those aren't the guys I work with. So I think that's kind of how I relate to athletes. And then from an X and O's standpoint, I would say that, like, so I have a background as an ATC, so I do take things from kind of a very biomechanics driven approach. I would say on the scale of like your super sport specific coaches all the way to your super old school coaches, I probably fall in the middle, further toward the old school side with a sprinkle of specificity instead of vice versa. So, generally guys who like to train with me are guys who like to lift, or maybe they don't like to lift, but they're the guys that get into, feeling strong. I do probably a little bit more plyometrics work than some coaches. And so some guys enjoy that. Some guys are terrified of doing any kind of plyometrics during the season and stuff like that. So we balance that, but those would be some of the things that I think make me. As far as like where it all comes from, I was a really young graduate. So I started college. I was still 17. So I graduated, took my first job right out of college, and I was younger than like half my team, and I was like ultra professional back then. Like I wanted to be seen as like older than I really was, and try to relate to guys like that. And I remember I had a conversation with a player because I would never tell anybody what my age was. You couldn't find out. And finally, I was alone with a guy, and he was like, "Look, man, like you can tell me. Like I know you're not that old. You can really tell me." And I told him, he was like, "Dang, like you are young." He's like, "But like we don't really care about that." He's like, "You work hard. You try to help us out. You do a really good job with us. Like we don't care about all that stuff." And that kind of was part of what changed me to be like, just be you. And if they don't like you, it's okay. You don't have to be the best coach for everybody. I think that a lot of times we want to be the greatest coach every guy has ever had, and it's not even humanly possible. There's certain guys that we're going to be really great coaches for. There's other guys we won't be as great a coach for, and we can adapt and try to become better and be pretty good, but you'll never be the perfect guy for them because you're not the perfect guy for them. So I kind of, that's my approach with guys.
So the cool thing about the NBA, many cool things, but comparing it to say like the NFL, is it in terms of the number of coaches, strength coaches, ATs, and assistants, and so on, they're relatively the same. Only that you're dealing with less than 20 guys. So yeah. the instruction is so much more personalized, in depth, I would say, and you've got so much more support. So I'm curious, how many strength coaches are on the Mavericks?
So we have one of the biggest staffs in the league. Generally, anytime, depending, road, home, we have like 4 to 5 strength coaches, all working with the players. So we only have, generally 3 to 4 guys that we're really mainly responsible for. We work with everybody, but our primary responsibility is generally 3 or 4 guys, so we can really get down to the nitty gritty with each guy.
That's practically private coaching, private training.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, so then that's awesome. First of all, that you have so much more of a team approach, not only on the court but off the court, not only at home but away. But so when it comes to program design, I know there you've got to stay in a certain parameters. Maybe they're going to say, okay, this is what we need to do from all perspectives, but I'm going to give you the hall pass to figure out how you're going to get these three players to the point I need them to be at. Is that how this is working for you?
That's exactly how it works. It's
No way.
yeah. So Jeremy gives us kind of some main points that we need to cover. There are certain things that we have to have in there for our guys in terms of our tendon protocols and some of the testing protocols that we do. But outside of those main points, we're given the flexibility to generally do what we need to do with the guys. We'll have scheduled team lifts or days that the players have to be in there lifting, but other than that, it's coordinating with your guys. You might have a guy that is playing 35, 36, 37, 38 minutes a night, and you say, okay, well, we're going to get our 2 lifts in this week and that's it. And it even may be with those guys, you say, we're getting 2 lifts, but one of them is going to be basically active recovery. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you may have a guy that's getting no minutes and you're saying, okay, we're going to get 4 or 5 different lifts. We're going to get multiple conditioning sessions, et cetera, et cetera. But you kind of are given the freedom to make your own decisions. And then, Jeremy is kind of the check and balance of making sure they make sense. We'll get guidance in terms of, hey, we have a really dense schedule coming up. Let's make sure that our lifts reflect that in this way. Or right now we have a great training opportunity. For example, like next week, we're about to start one of our longest home stretches of the season. So we're gonna have some great training opportunities, not a lot of back-to-backs. Let's plan for that by, let's push harder here. Let's pull back more here. But in terms of the details, we're really given a lot of freedom to figure out what our guys need and then execute it.
I imagine you're using some type of training software where it can be easily accessible for all of the professionals on this support crew, whether it's the head strength conditioning coach or the AT or the PT, or for that matter, even a performance nutritionist or your chef, to see here's what's going on. But in terms of the training program, is that how it is? Like you put it together, you plug in what you want to do for the lifts and tendon protocol, flexibility, mobility, plyometrics, and all that, and then your boss comes in, looks it over, and going, yeah, that's cool, or you know what, let's try and shift this around. I'd like to see more of this or that. Is that how that works also?
Yeah, that's generally the relationship. Is we plan it out, and he comes back, takes a look, say, hey, have you considered this? Have you thought about doing this? And then we come together from that, make adjustments based on room space. It may be something like the other day we had a lift where we had everybody in all at once. And so now it's like, all right, we got to plan around the fact that rack space is going to be limited, floor space. And so now let's come together. What are you doing today? What are you doing today? How can we make those things line up so we're not tripping all over each other? But that's generally what it is. And then we put it all back into our different databases so everybody is on the same page. We send out daily reports to kind of catch everybody up and make sure everybody knows what's going on with each guy. So, but that is generally how it works. Yeah.
And then can you give me something somewhat specific, like that you have grown aware of and improved your program design by what you just described? Like your boss comes back and says, hey, let's do this or that, or I'd like this. Any elements recently, or like, oh yeah, oh, right on. Okay, that's good. I hadn't considered that.
I think it's not so much general concepts, but I steal exercises all the time from my coworkers. We bounce stuff off each other all the time. We'll have, hey, I'm trying to figure out, because everything for me is problem solving. We're trying to figure out, this player has X problem. We are trying to solve it. I don't have the tool in my toolbox. What can I do for this? So I think that's the biggest impact, especially with our environment it's had on me, is being able to bounce ideas off of everybody on the staff. We're always talking through stuff every morning before the guys get in. We're looking at, hey, what are you doing with your guys? Oh, I like that. Actually, I think that works better for what I'm trying to accomplish with this guy. I'm going to pick that out of your program and put it in mine, or vice versa. So, so that would be probably a better example.
And are you guys kind of tight within the strength conditioning coaching? I mean, you guys meet on a regular basis?
Yeah. So I mean, we it's kind of the same as what I was saying earlier. We don't do a lot of official sit down. We have a meeting at 8 a.m. and everybody hears the agenda and all that stuff. it's more, we come in, we're there together, and we talk those things over just kind of naturally, pretty much every morning. And then every day after, our staff is super tight knit. We play a lot of pickleball, we shoot together, we lift together. After everybody leaves, me and one of our other strength coaches that's also at AT will practice our techniques on each other after everybody leaves. So we spend an enormous amount of time together to pick each other's brains.
And how much of your athletic training background do you implement into the strength conditioning? Are you doing the taping, or are you doing the different elements that the athletic training staff does? Does that carry over, or do you just go, you know what, that's my background, but these guys are the ones that are dealing with that. I'll throw in my 2 cents, but when it comes to kinesio tape or anything else, I'm just going to say, hey, just go see them.
Here, and even in Sacramento as well, I was really encouraged to go ahead and use it, be another set of hands. And here, I have a really symbiotic relationship with our athletic training staff. If I see the tables are full and their hands are full and someone wants treatment, I'll set up another table out in the weight room and they'll come and get treatment from me. I think that an area that has really been super beneficial for me is one, my evaluation of guys, being able to take guys on the table and do table evaluations, feel their tissues, feel the restrictions, be able to look through that stuff. And then also going from that, to me, I think I can be a lot more effective with my hands than I can be with prescribing a foam roller or a lacrosse ball or whatever. So as long as I have the time and the manpower, as long as I'm not, dealing with 2 or 3 other guys that need me, instead of prescribing, I got a guy that I'm trying to work on his foot mobility. And instead of saying, all right, go roll on that lacrosse ball for 30 seconds. No, come on, hop on the table or hop on this bench, hang your foot off and let's mobilize the tissue. Let's do that and then send you back into your workout. So that's encouraged here, that they ask us all the time, please, don't feel like you're stepping on toes. Because the first time that I did work on a guy here, I came to the ATs and I was like, look, I don't want to step on any toes. And they're like, no, there's not enough of us as it is. You see how many guys are on the table, jump in. So it's been great.
That's fabulous. That's really nice. So I love just diving deep about assessments, whether it's joint by joint or integrative whole body, closed chain, open chain. When you get somebody on the table, when you get one of your players on there, what are some of the go-to assessments that you're kind of going through?
I usually keep it pretty simple, try to keep it quick, because time is usually an issue with that, because of the fact that if I've got somebody on the table, there's probably somebody waiting for me in the weight room. So I try not to take too much time, but we'll generally just go joint by joint, look at the foot, look at the ankle, test range of motion, test, hip rotation, internal, external, look at leg length discrepancies, and, maybe test lat length test or something like that, simple. Go through, look at all those things. If there's something that can be quickly corrected, do a test, retest, and then, send them on their way. Or if there's something specific we're working on, for example, we've got, a couple guys that are working on more of their intrinsic foot strength and the way that their toes move and stuff like that. So with those guys, a lot of times I'll take them on the table, do some work on their foot, do their intrinsic exercises right then, and then go back to whatever else we were working on. So kind of just get short-term range of motion changes from our soft tissue work on the table, put it into action, try to get it, get them to now perform our movements while they're in that better position. And then in a perfect world, if a day is going really well, then it may be something where, okay, we start to see something in the weight room, see something in exercise that I don't like. Let's hop back on the table for a second, get another short-term change, and then continue our workout, rather than just trying to cue a guy out of those positions when in fact he can't achieve those positions anyway because he's got some sort of restriction that so I'm wasting my time. So I'd rather get that guy and be able, I'll give a shout out to one of my mentors, Jazz Randois over with Sacramento, coming from Altus, kind of going with their model of performance therapy of test, treat, implement, retest, treat, implement, and just keep that cycle going throughout a session.
Love that. And from my own approach, I won't say it's not like I'm I'm coining it or anything. The approach that I have been recently doing a lot more of is along the lines of what you were just saying. Obviously, assess and reassess, and the things that you do in the middle are going to give you the information that you need, whether it's effective or not. But typically, can we get some soft tissue work in an area? If I see somebody not moving the appropriate way and cueing and that's not really getting to where they need to be, something's not firing up, some joints not moving in the proper sequencing and so on, let's go into some soft tissue work, whether it's foam roll or other devices, other approaches. Then let's get into mobilization. Can we get those joints to actually move appropriately? And then can we load that tissue? So it's basically, foam rolling, mobilization, and loading. And that is just, I got to tell you, that is like the trifecta. And then you bring them back into that position, and now things are lighting up. They have access to get into this joint, and then the neuromuscular system starts firing. So it's really encouraging to hear, that whole approach that you're taking. And so I'm curious, though, you mentioned leg length discrepancy, and that's something that we hear a lot of. People come into training facilities and they are told by their chiropractor or somebody else, I've got one leg longer than the other. Now, I've got my own thoughts about that, but you're looking at somebody while they're laying on the table, you match up their heels, one's a little bit closer to the hip than the other. What does that tell you?
Well, I think you have to establish whether it's true or if it's just a postural thing. So a lot of times what we'll do is do some kind of like a PRI reset or something like that, retest. Now we usually don't have one, but if we have a guy that we know, because obviously once you've gotten a chance to retest some of these guys and look at that stuff, who has a true one, who doesn't, right? Who's postural and who's not. But it can be a really telling thing if you have someone who does not have a true leg length discrepancy. They get on the table and now they have a leg length discrepancy. Okay, now I need to look up the chain. What is causing this? Let's look at the hips. Let's look at what's going on up there and see if we have something that we can quickly fix there, so that we're not training in this bad position that we know doesn't really exist. So, there's only been a couple guys that I've come across that have a true leg length discrepancy.
In terms of like femoral length, like in terms of actually skeletal length, not necessarily insertion distance into the with the acetabulum or the femur, right? We're not talking about socket positioning or pelvic tilting or anything else. You're actually talking about the actual bone length discrepancy.
Yeah, a true bone length discrepancy. Only come across a couple. Most of them, it is either socket positioning or it's pelvic positioning or something like that. And so, but it is a telling test if you have someone that, like I said, it's not skeletal. It's easy to see. You look at it and you say, okay, well, this is a quick indicator of, it took me 5 seconds. Something's wrong today. What do we need to look at? So
yeah. How's that affecting mass management when they're upright? And then if you're going to be loading into them, what do you need to do to help offset that? That's good. It's interesting that you've got your background as an ATC. By the way, where did you become athletic trainer? Where did you get certified?
So I went to undergrad at Valdosta State University, which back then was probably the best undergrad program in Georgia. But now they've changed the ATC to a master's only degree, which was a bad decision. But
wait, you just can't breeze over that. You got to explain, why is that a bad decision?
Well, I think that being an athletic trainer, you could say the same thing about being a strength coach, is something that experiential knowledge is much more impactful than book knowledge. So what has happened, and you can see it in what's going on hiring athletic trainers right now, it's really hard to find athletic trainers because why would I go and pay for a master's degree when being an AT doesn't pay that much? So instead, what am I going to do? I'm going to go be a PT if I'm interested in that stuff. So I'm going to go be a PT because now it takes me just as long almost and just as much money almost to get paid teacher salary. So why would I do that? So you're seeing a lot of people leaving the field. You're seeing athletic trainers come out a lot less ready, because I was doing evals and rehabs independently as a junior, in college, versus these people aren't getting to see their first, they're not feeling their first positive anterior drawer until they're a grad student, or maybe until they're in the field and they're already working and they've never felt, a positive test in their life. So I think that athletic training is one of those things that what we learn in the books is just a baseline for everything we need to do, but we need to be good with our hands. We need to be good with all these things. So if we waste our time by being an undergraduate student and just learning general studies or whatever, pre-med or whatever it is, and then we don't get our first taste of athletic training experience until we're in grad school, I think it makes us worse athletic trainers. I'll also say that another thing that, like, when they initially were talking about passing that legislation within the NATA-BOC, like, that I was like, this is so dumb, is right. How many athletic trainers do we depend on, or did we back then, that were GAs, right? Especially in college, like you're not having full-time athletic trainers for every sport at a school that's got 30 sports. You've got GAs covering half of them, right? So, but if they don't have their certification or any experience to start their master's program, you can't legally let them be a GA and cover a sport on their own. So now you've taken all the cheap labor, flush it down the toilet, and those are super valuable experiences because you actually get to be on your own and doing stuff instead of having, a clinical director over you telling you, no, you were incorrect, fix this, do that. Like you need to be able to be in a position where there's something on you. You have to, make those mistakes and learn on your own. But, I don't think it's changing because they're trying to be like PTs, because they think that if we're more qualified, it'll drive pay up, but that's not what has happened at all. They're keeping pay the same, and instead they're just drying up our positions and changing them to PT positions. So yeah, that's neither here. I didn't mean to go on that way, but,
no, I'm happy to hear that. We don't get a chance to hear that side of it. So yeah, that's really fascinating. It's interesting.
Yeah.
With the desire for more knowledge comes a reduction in the field and a reduction in experiential learning. So yeah, quite interesting indeed. So I just back to the Mavs here, and you've got a few players. And how were they selected for you, or did you select these players, or how does that work? Does your boss kind of match you up with the personalities of the players that think will do well with you? What's that like?
So Jeremy kind of tries to match you up with guys who are going to, from a personality standpoint, mess with you, but also from a need standpoint, hopefully mess with you. So, guys that either are going to respond well to your training style, or, in my case, being an HEC, guys who maybe have, need some extra soft tissue, guys who maybe have an injury history that needs to be, kept close eye on. It's helpful to have them with me versus, somebody else maybe. So he tries to match that up. And then the great thing is, I think that there's around here, we just want everything to work well. So if it's not working, if it's not a good fit, we'll just switch. Nobody's feelings are hurt. It's kind of just like, all right, well, actually, I think you'd be better with this guy. Can you take this guy on, or whatever it is? So he kind of guides that, and then we give him feedback on how the players are doing. He gives us feedback on what he thinks from what he's seeing with us working with him. Is it going well? Is it going bad? And then we, make our flexible decisions based off that. But like I said, we have those guys that we're responsible for, but we work with everybody. There's not a guy that I haven't had some kind of interaction with in the weight room, whether it's during an activation. We may, things may get loaded down, pregame activations. You got everybody in there, everything's going at once. I'll take somebody else's guy, they'll take mine, and all that stuff. So it's pretty smooth. It's just more so from a programming standpoint, saying, okay, you need to make sure that everything is ready and prepared for this guy.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So with that, and your background as an ATC as well as your CSCS, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you got them both. So let's talk about common injuries within the NBA. We got inversion sprains, you've got high ankle sprains, you've got high hamstring pulls, probably low back. What are the other things you're dealing with?
Those would be the main ones. I mean, you see a decent amount of groin injuries, adductor stuff pop up sometimes. Obviously, you have the bigger things that the Achilles and the ACLs and stuff like that, that obviously you don't wish on anybody. That would be the main one.
How do you bulletproof? Like, what's your approach then? These guys, they've got this recurring thing going on, whether it's instability around the ACL, which is going to increase the likelihood of a recurring injury, and we don't want that happening. Or, this guy keeps coming down from the boards and off a rebound and rolling his ankle, stepping on somebody else. Like, what's your approach?
I think that I approach things mostly from that biomechanical standpoint first. So generally, if we're talking about the ACL, right? And we've got a guy that we've determined we're saying that it's, the typical, he's a quad dominant athlete, he needs more posterior chain development, yada, 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 yada. One of the things I look at is, all right, well, a lot of these guys, they do not have weak hamstrings as we've just labeled them. So why is it that he's not able to get enough leverage with that hamstring to save himself from getting anterior translation of that knee? So what's going on? So now we need to look elsewhere. Why is the hamstring not getting enough leverage? So it's probably something pelvic. It might be something at the ribs, even higher up. So I don't kind of try to get too focused in on any one injury and say, how do we prevent that? It's more so, how can we optimize everything posturally and then load it in a bunch of different positions, load it at a bunch of different speeds and a bunch of different magnitudes of movement, and then get our guys ready and prepared to have as many movement strategies as possible, so that when it's game time and you get caught in this position, you've been there some before. And then just, making guys stronger in general. We say strength is protective in a way, right? We want to have enough strength and force production to be able to save ourselves. So being able to make guys who are generally strong, and then also being able to work on those positions and have guys very good in many different patterns. So we're training through a full range of motion. We're training through a partial range of motion. We're training fast. We're training slow. We're training long ground contact time, short ground contact times, single leg, double leg. We want to have as much movement variability as we can, but we want to be doing it really well mechanically. So looking at, looking at the feet when they're doing these things, what's happening at the feet? Do we have stable feet? Are we all over the place? Do we have collapsing arches? Are we able to get, good stiffness? Do we have a good profile of stiffness, or are we super, super lax? Either way, let's make sure that we're able to do the other thing as well. We don't want to just be stiff and tight. We need to be able to be stiff when we want to be stiff and not be stiff at other times. So basically profiling these guys and looking through, toe to head to toe, whatever. Where is the issue? How can we get it more optimal? And then if we have, something specific pop up, then we'll manage it as needed. But generally, we're just trying to move everything to a more optimal place.
Man, if you're listening to this podcast without the video, you're not seeing my smile go ear to ear. I love that answer. I totally love that answer. So based on what you just told me, I am really quite curious as to where you get your information, because there's a few associations, organizations, or institutes right now that are on the top of my head going, I bet he studied with them. You already mentioned PRI, so we can check that one off the list. Where else? Because this is not found, unfortunately, in the essentials of strength and conditioning. This is not found in athletic training and curriculum in school. This is something that you must learn outside the parameters of the traditional, conventional approach that is being done right now. And what I mean by that is you're looking at all areas, integrated mass management, integrative force production through lever systems of the body. You're not talking about inhibition or facilitation of muscles, weak, short, anything like that. You are looking from a biomechanical standpoint, from the nose to the toes and back again. Where did you get this?
I think the biggest biggest change to me philosophically was I'm the type of guy that I fall down the rabbit hole when I find something I like. So what really changed me was I was a big Louis Simmons guy. and then also a big Buddy Morris guy. And so both of them would always reference all the different people that they would read. And so one of the people that Buddy Morris referenced a lot was Charlie Francis. So Charlie Francis, when I started reading his books, that's when I was like, that's who I want to be right there. And that's one of the things that I think was kind of, I found, because when I was at ATC first, I didn't like being at ATC. It was boring. I didn't feel like I was contributing to wins. I felt like I was just there for when something went wrong, right? And so that's why I switched to being a strength coach to begin with. And then once I was a strength coach, you kind of go back the other way, because now once you get in an environment like this, where it's different than when you're working in high school and you're just, someone gets hurt, they come in, you evaluate, you tape, you whatever, you rehab, and you go, because you have a million athletes and that's what you have to do. Then you start getting around, seeing people, do soft tissue work and kind of make magic happen on the spot, where it's like, man, we've been sitting here foam rolling for freaking 2 hours and I've gained 1 degree of range of motion, and this guy just touched him and he gained 20 degrees like that. Like, I want to do that, right? So Charlie Francis was like the first person that kind of married that in my head and was like, oh, you know what? I could do that, because Charlie Francis was a great track coach, but Charlie Francis was also a great weight room coach, and he was also a great therapist. He taught himself to do all those pieces so he could be a one-stop shop for his guys and take care of everything all together. And then once you get to there, like, it all just kind of makes sense, because you see this thing in the weight room, you see this limitation, you're like, man, why can't this guy get it? You put him on a table, you isolate that, and you see it again. Now you narrow it down to, okay, it's probably, this muscle, this capsule, whatever. Let me see what happens when I work on it. All right, now let me try it again. Oh my goodness, it's fixed. And so that was like really a big turning point in just the way that I thought was reading, the principles of Charlie Francis and all that stuff, that direction. And then that sent me down different routes. And when I was at Florida State, we had, I really wish I could Doug Kachigian come in from Resilient Performance, and he's a big PRI guy. He was really, really helpful in that he took PRI, dumbed it down into just a couple key points, and then taught us, less from a philosophical standpoint and more from a what would you actually use on a day-to-day basis. So that kind of got me started down that road. Then I went and took a couple PRI courses. Right now I'm actually doing Connor Harris's biomechanics course, and I'm moving extremely slowly in that one, but I do like it a lot.
And what's that involving when you're saying biomechanics? What are we talking?
So Connor Harris's course, he's a lot of it's very PRI based. Once again, it's doing a good job of kind of, PRI, you got all those courses that take hours and hours and hours and days. And for him, he's kind of, once again, compressing it into something a little bit more digestible from an application standpoint of what would you use. I see this issue, where should I be looking? And then what are the tools I would use to correct it? And kind of just going down that course for many different things. So he's another one that I like the way that he explains stuff. I like the course so far. I was actually watching his videos on YouTube before I realized there was a course. So a lot of his stuff, his information that I thought was really good. Those would be some main things. Like I took the TPI course. TPI actually was like pretty decent when it came to, if you approach it with that same frame of thought.
Sure.
Because of the fact that now you were connecting the swing to a physical fault. That was back when I was working with golf. So that was helpful. Also, working with track and field, I felt like was an incredibly helpful thing for me. Not just for one, working with the coaches was huge, because I believe track and field coaches are really just strength coaches that know a lot more about one side of the spectrum than we do. And so
you can also dive into gait mechanics too.
Exactly. You can talk about gait mechanics, and they're looking at things through a very similar lens to what I think we should be looking through. But also the other thing about track and field that I love, and swimming also to a degree, but a little easier with track and field, is it's the ultimate test retest of strength and conditioning. Like if you do something well and someone runs faster, then it worked. If you do something and someone runs slower or gets hurt, it probably did not work. So, you have like every week throughout track season, you have a great test retest right there available for you. You don't need force plates and, a million different things, technological things. You have the clock and that, or you have, the distance that they're throwing or jumping or whatever to tell you, is what I'm doing working or is it not? So I think that was helpful for me, just working in that environment for a while, because it really let me hone in on some things that were, maybe some things that I need to throw out because they're just not as useful as I thought they were. And then also, what are some things I can incorporate that I can steal from these coaches, and I can learn from these coaches about, making people better. So.
And then are there any approaches in regards to manual therapy, soft tissue work, aside from the sports massage, Swedish, the typical stuff, are there approaches within that realm that you have gravitated toward, applied kinesiology or whatever?
A lot of, generally it's a lot of ART,
Okay.
myofascial release. Another one that I've kind of been messing with, I'm not sure I would call it manual therapy, but we had a guy come in from dynamic contraction therapy, which is an interesting way to look at a couple things. So I've been dabbling in that a little bit, trying to learn some shiatsu as well. And those would probably be the primary things I use on the table with people most, I'd say. Oh, and then also in Sacramento, Jazz introduced me to joint pumping, and that has been super useful for a couple specific areas. So I actually need to get better resolution notes from him if he's listening, so I can read through them some more. But we did some of that in Sac, and I definitely saw some very useful results from that as well.
That's beautiful. So, just going down the road, well, I'll get two questions I kind of like to close up with. One, for the aspiring strength coach / athletic trainer, and for that matter, / physical therapist that's interested in getting into the realm of professional sports, what kind of advice would you give?
I think it's the same advice as I'd give anybody trying to get into any area of this. It's a very internship driven profession. The big thing that I would say that, I do think that it was great for me to take the path I did. I think the path I took was what made me who I am, but at the same time, it was really slow. This is year like 11, 12 for me. So, and I didn't, get where I wanted to be until 5 years ago, really. So spent a lot of time doing what I didn't really want to do to get where I wanted to be. So one of the advice is, if I can go back and tell myself, like, I always knew it was basketball. Basketball is the reason that I do what I do. I don't care. I always tell people I don't really love the weight room that much. Like, I'm not, like, I do, but at the same time, that's not why I'm here. Like, I wouldn't love it if I wasn't doing basketball. I'd be like, oh man, I'm going to work, but I don't go to work right now. Like, I'm having a ball. So the biggest thing I always tell myself is, you knew it was basketball all along. Don't work with anybody else. Just like stay with basketball. So when I was an intern at Georgia Tech, and I was working under Mike Bewley there, like, a lot of times I wonder about how the story would be different now if I had just stayed with Mike, instead of taking my job at Florida State and leaving basketball entirely. Because then for the next 4 or 5 years, I couldn't find a job in basketball at all. So what I would say is, if you can, like, try to intern. If you want to be in basketball, intern with basketball. If you want to be in football, intern with football. Get in that, kind of get in that pathway, and then stay there and don't go too far away. I think it can help you develop your skills to go away. But if what you're trying to do is get there quickly, then just know you're taking the long route. Now, I think without track and field, I wouldn't be here, because like Jazz wouldn't have been interested in me. But at the same time, if I wanted to get to at least the G League quicker, I think I could have got there a whole lot quicker if I had never left basketball. So, but yeah, intern, like, especially I would say if you're in college, like, take advantage of the fact that you have strength coaches right there. Don't waste 4 years while you're in college going to college. Like, spend your 4 years, go intern in the afternoons, in the summer, whatever. Like, get in with your strength coaches there. They're right there already. And then when you get out of college, if you spent 4 years interning with these guys, like, you've got a great chance that you can go get a GA-ship instead of being like the rest of us, where I got my first internship after I already had a master's degree. So that's a lot of wasted time that, you could have been learning, you could have been getting better. I talk about experiential knowledge. You could have had actual experiential knowledge under your belt, and it's all it does is take a couple hours out of your day, while you're already there. And we all know in college you got extra time. If you don't play sports, you have extra time for sure. So, like, use it. Introduce yourself to strength coaches. Tell them that's what you want to do. Introduce yourself to ATs. Tell them that's what you want to do, and then be around. And then, those are the people that are going to help you get started and help you get where you want to get later on down the road.
Okay, and then that feeds me right in. Like, you almost knew what I was going to ask next. Later, right down the road, where's Brandon Joyner? Like, are you going to aspire to be the high performance director, the lead performance director of an NBA team, whether it be Dallas or elsewhere? I know you're not going to work because you're loving what you're doing, which is a blessing and a gift that not everyone is granted in their lifetime. But somewhere down the road, whether it's 5 or 11 years or whatever it is, what are you aspiring to?
Honestly, I have the job I want to have. I mean, I think that, like, I could be a head somewhere or a director somewhere and do fine with it, do well with it. It's not necessarily something that I need, though. My biggest thing is I wanted to be in a position, like I said, I wanted to be Charlie Francis. I wanted to be somewhere where I could focus in really, really hard on whoever I'm working with and work with a reasonable amount enough of people that I could fully, open the bag and do everything with these people and do everything for these guys. And then I wanted to win. And so I'm here in Dallas. We're good. I work with, 3 or 4 guys. I deep dive with those 4 guys and I do a really good job. I have bosses that are great. I have coaching staff that is great. Like, I'm good. Like, as soon as my family gets moved in, I'm down here for the long haul until they get rid of me. So whatever that may be, whether it's in 10 years my boss retires and he wants me to be the new boss, cool. But as long as I'm paid fairly, my job is good, the city's good, and my wife and daughter are happy, then I'm good. I don't need much else.
That's fabulous, Brandon. Really, honestly, it's so good to hear. And I hope that it just continues on for you. So let's just say, some people want to be following you, whether they're Mavericks fans, NBA fans, or they're just wanting to get a better understanding. Instagram, like LinkedIn, how can they reach you? Do you have your own website? How does that work?
I guess out of everything, Instagram is probably my most active, even though I'm barely active. But Instagram is Coach B133. That's probably the best way. Very occasionally I'll post. But I haven't been posting much. I'll post my story every now and then, but it's usually car stuff.
Usually car stuff. All right, you're a car nut. No problem. I'll put the Instagram tag down in the descriptions, as well as just looking into the Mavericks organization, which I want to thank them, by the way, for being allowing us to have this conversation too, and just thank you for really just being open, honest, and completely willing to have this conversation. This has been great.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me on. It's been fun.
Well, that's it for another episode of Zealous Podcast. Next week, you got it, I'll be having another pro on, just like Brandon, who I can't thank enough for coming on and sharing everything he has, and as well as the Dallas Mavericks organization for allowing this to occur. You guys have yourself a great week. If you haven't clicked the subscribe button yet, what are you thinking? Come on, click it, and we'll talk to you later.